What's up YouTube, ODST General back again with another versus video. Now if you guys haven't seen this video series before, this is where we take two very similar games and put them up against each other, basically side by side, 30 minutes of gameplay, unedited, to give you guys a pretty good idea of what these games actually look like and kind of, you know, again, put them up side by side against each other. Now with that being said, more so than any other game series I've ever compared. That was really poorly phrased, but more than any other games I've compared on this series, this one, in my opinion, is probably the two most different games at their core than any others, just because they have a lot of similarities, but really when it comes down to the actual gameplay, the mechanics, really even the whole general idea behind the game, these two games are very, very different. Also, a little bit more so than any other game that I've played, this one's a little bit tougher to kind of show off in a direct, like, one-to-one comparison as far as starting off goes, because you don't have, like, a start of a shift, like, you know, police simulator, you know, patrol officers and stuff like that I've done in the past. With Star Citizen, when you log in, you always wake up in a bed, and it's multiplayer and everything, so you don't have, like, set story missions. You just get randomly generated missions that you can go out and do, or you can just go out into the world and do whatever. Whereas Starfield, you just log in wherever you left, and you've got story missions and all this other stuff to pick up. Now, with that being said, there is enough similarities here, I think, that justifies doing this series. So we've got, of course, Star Citizen on the left, as you guys have already seen by now, and we've got Starfield on the right. As you guys can already see, in Starfield, I'm already looking for a mission, and in Star Citizen, I'm barely out of the house and, like, partway through the city here, and I get distracted going through the city. One thing Star Citizen has going for it, for being a multiplayer world, is that it can be incredibly unpredictable, and as I came out to go to the transit system, I saw something that wasn't supposed to be there, and like, my brain knew this was a ship, but, like, it's not, there's not supposed to be ships here. It's a cracked in half ship. Somebody, I assume, intentionally landed there, or crashed it there, and they blocked off, like, two intersections, but, like, the way they did that, I don't know how they, like, perfectly split a ship in half and then crashed it like that. It was really impressive. But, yeah, it was pretty crazy. So yeah, I got a little distracted, so just kind of take that into account. I could have gotten out of the city a little bit faster, but, you know, this is definitely not something I encounter every day in Star Citizen when I'm playing it. So yeah, just, you know, keep that in mind when you're watching these two videos. There's probably a few minutes difference in terms of gameplay here. Other than that, you know, pricing, reviews, all that stuff is prone to changing. With Star Citizen being published only on the Cloud Imperium Gaming website, or that's the only way you can get it currently, it's a lot harder to actually do, like, reviews and stuff for it, because obviously those are curated. Any sort of reviews would be curated through either Steam and just looking at people's comments and stuff like that. They don't really have proper reviews for it. So I can't just do, like, an even comparison like Steam. So when you see the reviews and stuff come up, or pricing, stuff like that, keep that in mind. All that stuff's prone to change in the future. So, yeah, like I said, though, these games are very, very different. Obviously, Star Citizen does have a single-player campaign planned. I can't do the single-player campaign for Star Citizen, though, because it doesn't exist yet. At least not in a sense that players can play it. Obviously, they've got stuff they've shown off for it. They keep telling us it's coming, but, you know, who knows when. But given the scale of the persistent universe of Star Citizen, where it's much bigger, it's much more in line with Starfield's galaxy, or, you know, multiple solar systems that it has. And I say multiple, but that really doesn't justify it, because there's a significant amount of solar systems, whereas Star Citizen only has the one. Yeah, I don't know. I really have just only begun to tap into Starfield, I feel like. In some ways, I feel like I've definitely experienced pretty much all there is to experience with the combat in just a few hours, at least in terms of ground combat. I haven't really done as much space combat. If I'm being honest, like the AI in Starfield are pretty on par with Star Citizens. Star Citizens AI can be pretty stupid sometimes, and they'll just stand there like not do anything, and then other times they're very dangerous. And that's kind of been my experience with Starfield's AI, which is a little bit worse in my mind because it is a single player game and it's not based on like server performance or anything, whereas Star Citizen, part of what makes an AI dangerous or not is how well the server is doing. And you know, Star Citizen's kind of notorious for having not the greatest of servers, so a lot of times the AI aren't great, but that's really hit and miss. Now, yeah, as you can see though, still, I got a couple minutes behind because I got distracted by that ship, but still working on leaving the city, still working my way towards the starport, and then like, yeah, Starfield, I've already gotten off a planet because you don't have to like walk to your ship. You don't have to do that. There's fast traveling, and you can just go from like the middle of a planet and just go into your map and then jump to another planet, and it will skip you walking your ship. It'll skip your ship taking off. It'll skip your ship going to, you know, warp drive or whatever you want to call it. And it'll just be like, boom, you're in this other system, and you can do whatever you need to do from there. So definitely a lot faster to get into action in Starfield, because obviously we've already talked now in Starfield to a quest giver who's asked us to deliver a package, and that led us to a persuasion check, which, you know, it's like, hey, you know, we want more money for this, and then you play a little mini game where you have to try and convince them, and you have so many tries to convince them, but if you say the wrong thing, you'll fail the check, and you have to, again, you only have so many tries to actually complete it, so if you say something wrong, you know, you might not fail right away, but, you know, it does potentially hamper your chances of success. So right now we're finally getting to a point where I'm looking through the quests in Star Citizen. I'm trying to find something ideal. Now, I find one that looks, to me, really good, but as it turns out, not so much. And unfortunately, I decided to play something in Star Citizen that I hadn't tested before, which was under salvage, and I should have known better. I think I ended up going with salvage under personal, or under general. I can't remember for sure, but I was hoping what salvaging missions would allow me to do is just take stuff off the ships, like certain search missions do, and you could just like get crates with like tractor beams and stuff like that. And I couldn't find a personal salvaging tool, so I basically went on and I chose a mission where there really wasn't anything you could do. But that's how the game works, you know. I don't know every single mission in Star Citizen, and I don't know every single mission in Starfield. So when I'm accepting these missions, I don't really know what I'm getting into with either. And I think that's kind of why it makes it fair, and that's why I chose to keep this instead of trying to like re-record the Star Citizen mission, because it's not really fair for me to cherry pick mission, go like, oh, let me pick a more action-packed one for Star Citizen. I tried to go with something kind of similar in Starfield. I went to the Explorer's chart, and I tried getting into finding like landmarks, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I thought I was just supposed to like scan the planets and stuff. I didn't realize I had to like go to a landmark. I didn't quite understand what it meant. I had to like go back and look it back up, and I still haven't actually completed the mission in this either. But with that being said, there is definitely going to be action in at least one of these, and the other one maybe not so much. Now, with that being said, it really depends on what you're looking for in a game when it comes down to comparing these two. I don't think one's necessarily better than the other because they are different enough that you can't just say that, unfortunately. Because they offer such different things. It's kind of someone else has made this comparison. It's like comparing apples and oranges. They have similarities, but ultimately you wouldn't compare an apple to an orange in terms of quality of each, because they are different enough that you can't necessarily make that comparison. And despite that, I'm making this video anyways. But you know, if you're looking for something that you can play with your friends and you don't know what you're going to get and anything can happen, then Star Citizen's going to be a better game for you. Whereas if you don't care about that, if you want, you know, story, if you want AI interactions, you want a more stable gameplay experience, you know, something that's a little bit more expected, Starfield's going to be the way to go. But again, yeah, I mean, the gameplay itself varies quite a bit. I mean, you have a lot of gunplay and stuff between the games. Looting is a much bigger mechanic in Starfield, as you guys can see. I'm going around, I'm looting everything. Star Citizen does have looting. It does have the ability to get, you know, gear off of enemies and off of, you know, out of chests and pick plants and do mining and all the same stuff that Starfield has, just to a much lesser degree. I mean, everywhere I go in Starfield, I'm constantly maxing out the capacity of my inventory, and I'm having to juggle inventory between myself and my AI companions and my ship. Sorry guys, a little bit of hiccups or something there. Hopefully those don't stay around. But Star Citizen, that's not really the case. You don't get as much loot. It definitely fills up pretty quickly when you do get loot. I feel like the loot in Star Citizen's a little bit more valuable, a little bit more meaningful, because usually it's armor and weapons and stuff like that. Things that you don't come by nearly as frequently, and I think because you don't come by it as much, it does increase the value a little bit more in most cases. Obviously, once you get some money in Star Citizen, weapons and armor are incredibly cheap. It's just kind of a matter of knowing where to get them. Some things can only be gotten through loot, though, in Star Citizen. I don't know if that's the case or not through Starfield. I would imagine so with certain like legendaries and stuff I've encountered. I'm guessing you can't get that stuff just at a shop anywhere in the game, but I've only explored a couple of the planets. There's so many planets in Starfield. I've really, like, again, I've only really just started exploring it, relatively speaking. Yeah, so, and then going back to Star Citizen on the left here, we're just now taking off from the planet. Middle of combat on Starfield on the right here for a little bit now. We've been fighting robots, and you know, we've been on an alien planet for a little bit now, or another planet, I should say. There isn't really any non-alien planets in the game. Earth is so far removed from the Earth we know that it's basically an alien planet itself. Now, yeah, I don't know. Just finding things to really drive in on with these two games is so difficult, because both of these games are expansive enough that it's really hard to encapsulate everything about them, every minute detail and thing that you can do and loot and feature and functionality of each ship and all that stuff. It's really hard to encapsulate all of that within a 30-minute video and feel like you've done either game justice, especially when you're trying to talk about two games at once. There is an excellent video, nice little comparison done by a guy named Abbreviated Reviews, which he's got a pretty popular up-and-coming channel that he's been doing. And I loved the video he did on it, which was hilarious. Kind of a quick comparison of the two games. And he basically said the same thing, which is that you can't really compare these two games. Yes, they have similarities besides the name. There's other aspects to them. Some of the environments are kind of similar as far as some of the planets go. You know, there's certain aspects in there that are definitely similar, but you know, not enough so to really justify a direct comparison of the two games. These two games aren't really competition for one another. Yeah, if I had to prefer one or the other, though, I guess that's really where it comes from, as my personal preference, and part of why you guys are probably watching this video. I think, honestly, in the long run, I think Star Citizen's going to be the better of the two. I don't know if I feel that way right now, but again, I've only really just started exploring Starfield. Where Star Citizen, I've been playing it on and off for years, since you could just go in the hangar and that's all you could do. And you know, the thing is like, Starfield's been a lot of fun. I've been loving the quest lines, and the combat's decent and everything, and you know, looting and aspects of it, it's very similar to like Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls or Fallout, you know, obviously Bethesda's other games, and those are all really fun games. I loved all those games, and it's definitely something I go back and play again, you know, years down the line. I could see myself playing this again for you know, years down the line at least. Maybe not consistently that whole time, but on and off again. But with that being said, I don't know how to describe this. There's just something about Star Citizen where I hopped in there and I've gone, wow, this is impressive. Like, this is almost breathtaking. These environments, these ships, just all the stuff, all the AI standing around the center under the giant orb in Area 18 while somebody crashes their ship into the social area somehow, or intentionally or accidentally. It's a mystery, but yeah, it was it's just something's different about it. I think part of it comes down to the immersiveness. One thing that's really hurt Starfield in my mind is all of the loading screens. They're not really long loading screens, but they are everywhere. You go through a door to a habitation, and half the time those doors are loading screens. Not every time. I mean, you can see a lot of the video here. A lot of the doors I'm going through just open up. They're part of the world chunk or whatever, but you've only got like a small section of world, so when you're going into these habitations and stuff like that, you know, it's not loading a huge area. None of these maps in Starfield, as far as I've seen, are bigger than, you know, Skyrim or even Oblivion had, where it's much larger maps. So it's kind of confusing that, like, so many of the bigger buildings and stuff like that, when you get into some of the larger structures and stuff, get instanced off like they do. There's a couple of exceptions where it's like storyline quest stuff or whatever that instances off, that get it, but a lot of times I don't understand. You know, it's like you go from the bottom of your ship up to the top of your ship or whatever to the inside of your ship, and that's a separate instance out section from the inside cargo bay to the top in the starter ship. So in my mind, all of the loading screens and just kind of lack of immersion does hurt Starfield compared to Star Citizen. Star Citizen does that incredibly well. It's not always ideal because, again, I mean, look how long it's taken us to get into a mission. We've already gone through, you know, most of this this enemy-held facility where these robots have gone rogue, and we've gotten into a bunch of combat. We've looted a bunch of stuff. We've talked to a trader about picking up an extra mission where we had to do a persuasion check, and you know, we're still deep in that combat mission. Whereas with Star Citizen, I've picked up a single mission, and I've done a bunch of traveling. Now, I could have encountered another player. Things could have evolved. They could have gone a lot crazier than Starfield did potentially, but they didn't. And usually that's going to be the case with Star Citizen. If I'm being honest, in my experience at least, there's not a whole lot of times things are going to really drastically evolve from what your plans are, except for because of bugs where things like your ships explode or crash or whatever silliness might happen in Star Citizen. But in terms of, again, feeling immersed, though, if we go back to that aspect, yeah, Star Citizen, hands down, far and away the best. Sorry guys, I sort of thought that distracted me. Anyways, yeah, so there's something else, and I've had a hard time really putting my finger on what the other thing is besides the immersion aspect. I mean, you know, of the two games and the seamless transitions and lack of loading screens in Star Citizen. That's probably the biggest thing, but I also think the multiplayer aspect makes a difference, because even though you don't very frequently see other players outside of social settings, I think the idea that players and AI look so similar is kind of a big thing, because it kind of gives this impression that anybody can be a player, anybody could do potentially anything when you encounter them, and you know, you never know what to expect from the people around you. Whereas with the AI in Starfield, it just feels much more clearly defined and clear cut. You know, obviously you have a lot of people standing around. A lot of them are faceless NPCs, just the same as Star Citizen. A lot of them just, you know, kind of carrying on doing nothing really. But you know, the thing is with Star Citizen, any of those could just be a player just standing there hiding, and you know, you're not paying attention, and then that guy sneaks onto your ship and pirates you or steals your ship when you're not paying attention. Some people might not like that, but for me that makes a fun gameplay element, makes the game a lot more interesting and unpredictable. I actually just remembered, I lied to you guys I had going on in Star Citizen. I did end up re-recording, and I can't remember why, because like I said, I wanted to just show you guys a chunk of life thing, but I ended up re-recording the mission for some reason. And this is really funny because this is actually even worse than kind of whiffing on the mission where there was nothing going on except for me exploring through ships with my gun out, you know, not sure if there was going to be any enemies or anything. I ended up taking a cargo transport mission, and it's going to be really funny because the server is going to disconnect here. So all of that work, all of the effort is we look at Star Citizen, and I've put in like the same amount of time in Star Citizen as Starfield, as you guys have seen. Just I've tried to make this as similar as possible again, where it's both our characters staring out at bed. I even went out of my way in Starfield just to make these two a little bit more similar. And the server ends up disconnecting, and you'll see that here in a minute. So like right now I'm struggling to try and get these boxes where it's not wanting to like get it correctly with the tractor beam, so I end up physically picking up the box to run it over to the ship. And we're on a timer here, so I'm trying to rush a little bit in Star Citizen because these things explode if you don't transport them to where they need to get to quickly enough. And 12 minutes doesn't sound like a lot of time, and again, given how long the mission has taken this far, you would think that we wouldn't really have the time to do it. But once you're actually out in Star Citizen and you're kind of exploring like this, it does tend to pick up pace a little bit once you're actually out doing missions. It's just getting to the point of doing the missions in the first place. Also, you can save time in Star Citizen where you can just choose to respawn on a space station, so you don't have to travel from like the bed through a train and all the other stuff that I went through. I hadn't played this new or since the last patch or update or whatever, so it's been a while since I've had a chance to play Star Citizen, and because of that, I was back down on a planet. I had to like reset my character and all that stuff since the last update, and yeah. So I was down on the planet. So just keep that in mind too while watching this, even though it did take a lot longer. I could have cut down on the time a fair amount, but this is also going to be like a new player's experience. A lot of players probably aren't actually going to transition themselves up onto a space station or whatever to save time. But that is something you can do, so just keep that in mind too, is that Star Citizen, in theory, I could have cut down on the time quite a bit more than what I actually did had I taken some time to pregame this a little bit more, and I had gone in and actually set up my stuff and transferred all my stuff up to a space station and had a ship ready to go, would spawn in and everything like that, which I didn't do, and I could have done. So yeah, here we are, and this is where the server is disconnected pretty much at this point. So the server is still technically going in big quotation marks, but you can see it's telling me that's only closed, not open, and it's closed. And I'm clicking it, it's not working, so then I go over to this other one and I start clicking open, and the open's not working either. So by this point I'm pretty sure the server's already disconnected and it just hasn't really registered with the server yet, or it's in the process of crashing. So I tried tractor beaming and it's not recognizing the objects and all that stuff. And again, Starfield. Still in the middle of combat, still exploring through this this facility and everything. We're fighting off a bunch of robots. I'm missing shots at point blank range because the aiming in Starfield's incredibly inaccurate for whatever reason I find. I guess maybe because the recoil's not like really bad. They put in like artificial missing basically or something. I don't really know. There is obviously, being an RPG more so than Star Citizen, you do have less skill-based acts, or it's less skill-based, and it's more built around leveling up your character, improving your character over time. Whereas Star Citizen, the only improvements you have for your character over time is when you go out and you buy new ships or new armor or whatever. But other than that, honestly, your first minute in Star Citizen and your last minutes in Star Citizen, or your whatever last gameplay, is really going to be just coming down to skill. You're not necessarily going to be doing a whole lot better. You're not going to have better percentages as far as like aiming and accuracy and stuff like that. It's just gonna be like, yeah, you might have a better gun, but when it comes down to it, it's just you know the game better by that point. You're playing better, and that's what's impacting it and changing things, which I can... I think I'd probably prefer a skill-based method in this sort of game, but there isn't necessarily anything wrong with either or. Both are definitely fun, and I've definitely played a lot of RPGs, so I can't really bash on an RPG for having RPG elements, right? That would be silly. So yeah, at this point we've now crashed in Star Citizen. I've thrown up a little black bar on the right there just to cover up my friends list, because I don't want to get anybody doxxed, potentially, for me making this stupid video. Nobody needs to be caught in the crossfire of that, because I'm sure this will draw a little bit of ire. Yeah, so we're loading back in, and at this point I was kind of going like, I'm already at 25 minutes. If I load back in, again, we're going to be back on the planet where we started. We're going to have to go back to the train and everything. Part of me was tempted just to quit right then and there and say, you know, we'll try to re-record it again or whatever. But, you know, at this point it was like, hey, you know what? Crash wasn't my fault. It's part of the gameplay experience. It's just one of those things that happens in Star Citizen right now. Maybe one day we won't have all the 30Ks and crashes, but that is part of the game as it is now. So I was like, you know what? If I want to show a genuine, true experience of Star Citizen, 30 minutes from start to finish, this is what it looks like. So now I'm back right where I started, having accomplished nothing, and I'm going back to my ship again to try again to get something done. Now, it's not fair because I have definitely gone out and I've had hours-long gameplay sessions, multiple hours, where, you know, nothing happens, everything works perfectly, and missions all go just as you would expect and want, and everything's perfectly smooth. And then you have other times where it's this, and, you know, you spend your whole time in the game just traveling, trying to get to your ship and actually do something, only for everything to just basically get, you know, completely sabotaged by a bad server or something goofy happening. The other thing is, too, and I don't think it even gets necessarily far enough to see this in this video because of the time it takes you to get from your habitat to the spaceport, even if you're not stopping because of a crashed ship. You know, I would have had to go and like reclaim my ship because my ship wasn't docked anywhere when the game crashed. It was just out in the middle of nowhere, so I have to reclaim the ship and say, hey, I need to file an insurance claim. I need you guys to deliver me a new ship, which takes like 20 minutes for it to count down on the constellations like that.
I wanted to ask you about the artifact you found on Bactera.
And so here on the right with Starfield, you can see again, I'm carrying on a conversation. Something that you really don't get in Star Citizen. They have a few people that'll kind of talk to you a little bit, but nothing this extensive, and Starfield has tons and tons and tons of this. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and we'll start winding down the video here. We've only got a couple minutes left in the actual gameplay footage before we hit the outro, so I'm kind of curious, guys, what do you prefer between Starfield and Star Citizen if you guys have played both? If you guys haven't played both, I guess I still want to know your opinions on the two games. That's, of course, always welcome. I know a lot of people don't like Star Citizen, and it's not hard to see why. It's definitely got a lot of controversy. I do think a lot of people kind of unfairly give it a bad rap, where a lot of people still genuinely seem to think there's no gameplay and that the game's just like walking through, you know, a hangar with your ship or whatever. But, you know, it's definitely gotten to be a lot more than that, and it's still not smooth or anything though, but it's definitely kind of become more of a game, so I'm kind of curious, having watched the two gameplay footage is maybe not the greatest, but if you guys have played it, or if you've watched other gameplay footage, I'd love to know what your thoughts on the two games are. Other than that, yeah, I think that's going to be pretty much it for the video. We're, again, just about to wrap up on the time here on my end, at least. We might be a few seconds off, but, alright guys, thanks for watching. Take it easy. I'll see you all in the next one.
Eyewitness accounts, scores of inconclusive metallurgical test results, and
okay, I have a few more seconds, but, yeah, I figured I'd end it before that.
Bewildering.
But I waited a little, or I got done a little too early. Now we got about 10 seconds
An
left.
explorer's dream to solve a mystery like
Alright,
this.
about 5, so I'll see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.
I knew I picked the right person for the job. Look, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to talk, and for keeping an open mind. And I also wanted to say, well,